From Zero to Millionaire, a simple, effective, and stress-free way to invest in the stock market. Nicholas Barub, oceanoffpdf.com, to Penelope, who enlightens me, your oceanoffpdf.com, contents, preface, introduction. It's all going to collapse. Chapter 1, Explosions and Contractions. Chapter 2, Seeking the Rare Pearl. Chapter 3, Our Fair Share of the Profits. Chapter 4, Stocks and Bonds. Chapter 5, Driving at 130 miles per hour on the highway. Chapter 6, Turn off the TV, switch off your notifications. Chapter 7, Celebrating Stock Market Corrections. Chapter 8, A Smart Investor's Guide to Self-Defense. Chapter 9, Grow Your Wealth. Conclusion, The Cow and the Shark. Acknowledgements. About the author. Publishing details, oceanoffpdf.com. Preface. You don't seem to give much thought to the matter in hand, I said at last, interrupting Holmes. No data yet, he answered. It is a capital mistake to theorize before you have all the evidence. It biases the judgment. Arthur Conan Doyle, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I'm not an investor. People always tell me you should have your money working for you. I've decided I'll do the work. I'm going to let the money relax. Jerry Seinfeld, comedian. The pile of books cluttering my bedside table threatened to collapse on my head overnight. But my mind was elsewhere. I was about to get rich. I was 33 years old and living in the Silver Lake area of Los Angeles, a bohemian chic neighborhood of the West Coast megalopolis. I was convinced that the stock market was about to crash. The year was 2010, and the U.S. economy was in freefall. We were experiencing the greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. On Wall Street, hundreds of employees of major banks and investment firms had recently emerged from their office towers, staring blankly, cardboard boxes under their arms. In my neighborhood, dozens of empty commercial spaces were for sale or rent. The decline of America was palpable. It seemed endless. After falling violently, the U.S. stock market had rebounded by a whopping 60% in just a few months. Many observers believed that this rally was meaningless, that a new and deeper correction was imminent. I was one of them. I had just finished reading several books about the financial crisis, including The Big Short one by Michael Lewis and The Greatest Trade Ever, 2 by Gregory Zuckerman, which told the story of how astute investors predicted the bursting of the U.S. housing bubble and positioned themselves to profit. I was fascinated by the story of these stubborn people who endured the ridicule of their peers in the good years and then became wise visionaries when the market crashed. This time I decided the visionary would be me. I had just made a $10,000 profit on the resale of an apartment in Montreal. I decided to invest this amount in a simple idea, that Wall Street would collapse. To place my bet, I bought put options, which are financial products that increase in value if the price of the stock to which they are linked falls. I had to open a brokerage account that allowed me to trade on the Chicago Stock Exchange. I had never done this before. I learned what to do by reading authors and bloggers who thought, like I did, that the market was going to crash. My plan was to add money to my bet as soon as the market tipped in my favor. I put in the energy and determination of someone who sees what few others are willing to consider. From day one, I lost money. Every time I checked my brokerage account, my heart stopped beating. My $10,000 had melted away by a few $100s. Not only was the stock market refusing to collapse, it was still going up. I wasn't going to be discouraged. You can't climb a mountain without getting scratched. After a few months, the result was clear. I had failed. My options were worth a few $100s when I resigned myself to selling them. If investing in the stock market was an exam, I had received my corrected paper, marked with a big 0 written in red ink. I don't know if $10,000 is a lot of money to you or not. I remember that losing that amount so quickly was unpleasant enough to make me think about it often. I still can't explain it to myself, but rather than banish them from my life, I decided to figure out how the financial markets worked. In the years that followed, I spent thousands of hours reading about finance and investing. I was able to interview some of the most prolific investors and financial writers of our time, including Monish Pabrai, Morgan Housel, Andrew Hallam, Peter Edney, the wildly popular blogger who writes under the pen name of Mr. Money Mustache, and many others. I absorbed the history of the markets and learned about the mistakes made by most investors and the proven ways to make long-term investments. I took an in-depth look at the lives and writings of financial giants, including Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, Benjamin Graham, and John Bogle, who are considered some of the greatest investors in history. Like kids in a candy store, Buffett and Munger were buying stocks with their hands full, while I was busy betting on the stock market apocalypse. I realized that in my rush to get rich, I had broken all the rules that have governed successful stock market investing for over 400 years. I realized that the stock market is not a casino, nor is it a game of daring or trickery. That for generations, those who thought they could make a quick buck have found themselves in my situation with a bloody lip. I also saw that this world I had imagined to be barren was populated by fascinating characters, fortunes won and lost, and the full range of human emotions multiplied tenfold by the prospect of financial gain, one of the most powerful intoxicants that ever existed. 2 years after my embarrassing failure, I started investing again. This time I didn't regret it. I have since learned that all investors have made mistakes. Even Warren Buffett says he lost 20% of his money on an unfortunate investment he made in his early 20s, when he didn't have the experience to understand what he was doing. That 20% that went up in smoke would be worth billions of dollars today. Fairly big mistake, he once quipped. 3. The purpose of this book is to prevent you from seeing thousands of dollars disappear before you become a good investor. If you already have, I'm sorry. Some lessons hurt more than others. Learning the lessons. The thrust of my first book published in French. Les millionnaires ne sont pas ceux que vous croyez. Millionaires are not who you think they are was that wealth is not found in the hope of a pay raise or a big year-end bonus, nor is it found in the pursuit of an exceptional investment. Wealth is found in the choices we make with the money we have now, today. I gave a series of lectures after the publication of the book. At the end of each presentation, I took 30 or 40 minutes to talk with the people who came to hear me. I expected to have to answer questions about the lives of the millionaires I interviewed, or to justify the statistics I was putting forward. I received no such questions. What everyone who raised their hand wanted to know was how to invest in the stock market. When I returned home after these conferences, I was happy to have had these exchanges. At the same time, I felt a little dizzy, partly because of me. People might become investors. It's almost as if by talking about a beautiful faraway land, I convinced them to grab a backpack, some hiking boots, and get going. I knew they were making the right decision. I also knew that there would be difficulties, doubts, and fears along the way. I lived it, and I continue to live it every day. These are the thoughts that led me to write this book. As I talk about investing, I notice that the subject is full of myths, preconceived notions, and disturbing beliefs. Money has always been a magnet for questionable strategies. At a time when more people in the Western world are investing in the stock market than ever before, I realize that many investors feel that they are missing out on something. We hear our friends and colleagues talk about how well they are doing, and we wonder why our own investments seem to be stalling. Should we buy stocks in more exciting companies, change financial planners, or portfolio managers? Find someone special, someone who can find stocks that will increase in value dramatically over time. This book will attempt to answer these questions. Investing is a simple activity, which a whole industry strives to make complicated to justify its existence. So let me cover some important lessons in these pages so that you don't make the mistakes I did to acquire them. Nicholas Berube. 1 Michael Lewis, The Big Short. Inside the Doomsday Machine. Norton Company, 2010. 2 Gregory Zuckerman, The Greatest Trade Ever. The behind-the-scenes story of how John Paulson defied Wall Street and made financial history. Crown Business, 2009. 3 Rupert Hargreaves, Warren Buffett, Learn from Your Mistakes and Move Forward. Yahoo Finance, October the 16th, 2018. ENOCNOPORF.com. Introduction. It's all going to collapse. If you're not sure what to be alarmed about, everything is alarming. Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut. Don T. think the United States is going to survive. Several years ago, I was having lunch with a friend in a San Francisco restaurant when he made this confession. Around us, young waiters brought fair trade espressos and gluten-free bread to customers dressed in relaxed yet sophisticated attire. Near the entrance, yoga mats rolled up in specialized covers lay jumbled together like multicolored offerings to the gods of wellness and self-discovery. I had just said that I was optimistic about the future of the United States. My friend apparently was not. The only thing keeping Wall Street alive is the devaluation of the dollar, he said. The dollar is no longer backed by gold. The U.S. economy will collapse. There's no escaping it. It's been a long time since gold was used as collateral for the U.S. currency, I replied. Yes, but little by little people are realizing that. I asked my friend if he was the type to have canned goods in his basement to be ready in case of disaster. We have enough food to last a year, he said. I took a bite of hash browns. Behind him, a lady was parking a BMW station wagon along the sidewalk. Yep, I'm a prepper, he added with a smile, able to laugh at himself. Do you buy gold? I asked. Of course, but you have to buy physical gold, otherwise it's worthless. I'm in the process of arranging to have the gold stored. By the way, why do you think the Americans are in Afghanistan? It's for the rare earth elements. Same thing with Mali. A few families control the world banking system. They support Wall Street. It's all going to collapse. A decade has passed since the morning of our conversation. In that time, U.S. stock markets, which account for more than half of the total value of all stock markets around the world, have quadrupled in value, advancing almost relentlessly in line with corporate productivity and profits. The price of gold is lower than the day when we had our lunch. My friend was a brilliant guy who worked in the demanding world of San Francisco technology companies. He was a professional who lived in a nice house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in one of the most admired cities on earth. I am not telling this story to show that my friend was wrong. As I wrote in the preface, I myself foresaw a dramatic stock market crash, which came very close to ending my fledgling investment career. I tell it because if you talk to people about stock market investments, you're likely to quickly hear fear-mongering. It's a casino, or it's all going to crash. Wake up. A few years ago, during a Christmas party, a family member told me that a stock market apocalypse was about to happen. I sold everything, he told me, a bottle of beer in hand, the Christmas tree glittering behind him. The stock market has gone up a lot and is breaking record after record. I have a bad feeling. I think the next crash will be as devastating as ever. A few months later, one of my neighbors mentioned the same fear. We're due for a good drubbing, he revealed. As it turned out, they weren't completely wrong. The market did eventually experience downturns in the years that followed, but the market is now higher than when they made these dark predictions. My sampling is small and anecdotal, I admit, but around me, it is almost always men who believe they know how to listen to their gut to know the future of the markets. And like the examples cited here, they are mostly highly educated men who are competent in their field and have enviable careers. This hunch that imminent chaos is about to strike can seduce the bravest person and the most experienced market expert. This hunch is worthless. I will explain why. The superpowers of investors. Investing is a strange practice, which has its origin in a renunciation. To invest is to give up spending money now to have more money later. Why do it? In fact, the question should be, do we have a choice? Our government pensions and annuities were designed to supplement retirement income, not replace it. The number of employers offering attractive retirement plans is falling. And if you're self-employed or an entrepreneur, you don't need me to tell you that you must fund your own lifestyle, which will likely last for decades after you stop working. And investing has risks. Not investing carries far greater risks. Rather than treading water from paycheck to paycheck, buying financial assets allows us to gain freedom and enjoy it throughout our lives. Taking a year off to travel, not needing the bank to buy a car or property, dealing with a costly contingency in seconds, or making generous donations to those in need are just some of the superpowers that investors possess. Because investing is not taught in school, Many people believe that it is too complicated, too risky, or too abstract, without realizing that investing well is extremely simple and within virtually everyone's reach. As a result, many people buy a house or apartment and pay the mortgage without seeing the value of investing elsewhere. They don't realize that they are missing out on an opportunity for wealth that is light years away from the gains that residential real estate can make. If the gains from the sale of a home are striking, it is because, for most of us, it is the only time in our lives that we are faced with amounts in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. Without a point of comparison, the price of a home, even a modest one, takes on an impressive value that never ceases to fascinate. Investor Warren Buffett bought his current home in Omaha, Nebraska in 1958. He paid $31,500 for it. His property is now valued at $700,000. But if he had invested his $31,500 in the stock market instead, that investment would be worth over $23 million today. Is it any wonder that Buffett has spent his life buying businesses and not villas, and that he has referred to his house as Buffett's Folly? The reason the rich are getting richer faster than the rest of the population is that they are not letting most of their net worth sleep in the walls that protect them from the rain and wind. The rich get richer because they buy financial assets such as stocks, also called equities, mutual funds, and bonds. 40%, the top 1% of the wealthiest Americans, have 40% of their net worth invested in stocks and mutual funds, while the bottom 50% in terms of wealth on average only hold 2% of their assets in these types of investments. For a long time, only the wealthy had the means and contacts to invest in these other types of assets. This is no longer true. Of course, having little money is a hindrance to investing, but not an insurmountable obstacle. Starting to invest $5 a day at the age of 20 can make us millionaires in retirement, without taking unnecessary risks, without reading financial newspapers or becoming a finance nerd. You don't need to have worn out the benches of business schools to become a great investor. In fact, the further you are from business schools, the more of an innate advantage you have in growing your money. That's what you'll discover in this book. Books that teach investing in the stock market often assume that with the necessary tools to distinguish promising companies, investors can go ahead and build a portfolio that will grow nicely over the years. Yet researchers have shown that our emotions and behavior contribute far more to our success than the value of any publicly traded company. The latest studies also show that spending our energy and time looking for stocks that will make us richer essentially makes us poorer. Indeed, you will discover that it is more advantageous to buy the whole haystack than to spend your time looking for the needle. This is a counterintuitive strategy, but one that will pay off and allow you to join the leading group of the best investors on the planet. You'll beat the returns of financial professionals, those highly paid, educated people who drive around in luxury vehicles to manage millions of dollars from their downtown towers. Through these pages, I will show you how to get better returns than the pros and experience fewer declines in market storms. All this while spending less than 1 hour per year managing your investments. And if you choose to have a professional handle your investments, you'll learn how to select someone who will charge transparent and reasonable fees and who will work in your best interests, not in the interest of a financial giant that pays their salary. Investment myths. If there is an underlying theme in this book, it's that the stock market, arguably the most powerful device ever invented for growing one's wealth, is full of myths, false promises, and is often misunderstood by investors. In Chapter 1, I show how stock bubbles have humbled generations of investors and how Newton got caught up in one. In Chapter 2, we see why stock picking, even when done by market experts, almost invariably leads to disappointing results. Chapters 3 and 4 are about how index fund investing got invented and laughed at. I show in Chapters 5 and 6 why lawyers, doctors, and dentists are often the worst investors and why the news media won't make us rich. In Chapter 7, I explain how to deal with the inevitable market downturns and crashes. Chapter 8 is about why investing with a typical financial advisor is a bit like taking a very expensive taxi on a dangerous exotic island. While in Chapter 9, I show you exactly how to invest your money depending on the level of autonomy you want as an investor and how you can do so ethically and responsibly. Good practices. No one comes into this world knowing how to invest. Unfortunately, very few leave it having learned to do so. How could I have been such an idiot? If you've never yelled that sentence at yourself in a fury, you're not an investor. Jason Zweig, financial author. Anyone who wants to lose weight knows not to fill their freezer with frozen pizzas and fries. A person who wants to increase their physical strength and endurance is not going to spend their evenings smoking cigarettes on the couch, believing that they are getting closer to their goals. When it comes to financial investments, however, many people do the equivalent of eating junk food in the belief that they are taking care of their health, an illusion maintained by financial institutions and professionals who claim to be good advisors. Unlike the main principles of nutrition and physical activity, good investment practices are rarely taught in school and are not the subject of extensive government advertising campaigns. This knowledge is rarely passed on to us by our parents, who are often uncomfortable with the subject themselves. The media sometimes offers us good leads, but they get lost in an avalanche of information that is more likely to lead us astray than to bring us closer to our goal. For most people, the prospect of learning about this subject is as exciting as spending a weekend reading the owner's manual for their vehicle, buried in the back of the glove compartment. As a result, someone who wants to get rich from their investments may engage in behaviors that impoverish them, or at the very least, deprive them of more generous returns. Good investment practices have been known for decades, but the transfer of knowledge from researchers to the public has largely not happened. These lessons are at the heart of the book you are holding in your hands, and that I hope is catchier than a Toyota owner's manual. An ignorant mind is precisely not a spotless, empty vessel, wrote the famous psychologist David Dunning, but one that's filled with the clutter of irrelevant or misleading life experiences, theories, facts, intuitions, strategies, algorithms, heuristics, metaphors, and hunches that regrettably have the look and feel of useful and accurate knowledge. 4. I can relate to that statement. I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong when I started investing for a dramatic market decline several years ago. In fact, I would have reacted badly if someone had told me I didn't know what I was doing. That person would have been right. I didn't know what I was doing. The Israeli diplomat Abba Eban used to say that nations and men will always find the right solution after all other solutions have been tried. I have concluded that investors work the same way. To understand why, let's go to the heart of London at the beginning of the 18th century, when the most prominent people in society were obsessed with a few pieces of paper. 4. Stephen Novella, Lessons from Dunning-Kruger. Neurologica blog, November 6, 2014. OceanofPDF.com. Chapter 1. Explosions and Contractions. Thinking is easy. Acting is difficult. But the most difficult thing in the world is to act in accordance with one's thinking. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, novelist and scientist. The madness of people. Isaac Newton was not going to let the opportunity of a lifetime slip away. The summer of 1720 was about to begin, and the mercury was over 70 Fahrenheit in the streets of London when Newton, the genius behind the theory of universal gravitation and one of the greatest scientists of all time, decided to invest most of his fortune in shares of the South Sea Company. Founded 9 years earlier by members of the London intelligentsia, the South Sea Company had been given a monopoly by the British government on trade routes to the Spanish colonies in America to transport slaves and gold. George I, the King of Great Britain at the time, was one of the directors of the company, which inspired confidence in the eyes of investors. In truth, the company was making little profit, but that did not prevent the public from seeing an opportunity to invest in a business that was sure to do well with the expansion of international trade. The subject was so exciting that it monopolized much of the conversation in London. Sir Isaac Newton had first invested in the shares of the South Sea Company in February 1720. Within a few months, his investments had doubled in value. Convinced that the company was in the grip of a speculative mania, Newton decided to realize his profit and sell his shares on April 19th of the same year. Far from falling, the price of shares continued to rise. Newton was no longer getting rich, while his friends and acquaintances continued to see their fortunes grow daily. 2 months after selling, Newton abandoned his reserve. On June 14th, he decided to invest again by putting most of his money into the company's stock. In September, a fraud scandal at the South Sea Company erupted, and its shares quickly lost 90% of their value. Many of the company's top executives were imprisoned in the Tower of London, including members of parliament, and they had their assets confiscated. The scandal was so resounding that it plagued the British financial markets and undermined business formation for generations. 5. By some accounts, Newton lost 20,000 English pounds in the collapse of the South Sea Company, the equivalent of 20 million in today's dollars. 6. I can calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people, the physicist is claimed to have concluded. It is said that Newton was so affected by this debacle that, until his death, he was unable to bear the mention of the South Sea Company's name in his presence. This episode illustrates how even the most rational and brilliant people can succumb to a speculative mania, which is only obvious in retrospect. The South Sea Company's speculative mania was one of the most devastating of its time. But nearly a century earlier, another bubble had hit elsewhere in Europe, the tulip crisis. A bulb for a house. Considered by many historians to be one of the first speculative bubbles in history, the tulip crisis of the 17th century had its origins in the growing interest of the citizens of the Netherlands in gardening. One of the most spectacular and sought-after flowers of the time was the tulip, whose bulbs from Constantinople had the advantage of withstanding the cold winters of northern Europe. Gradually, tulips began to appear in the gardens of the gentry in Amsterdam and elsewhere. Gardeners began to create hybrid bulbs that produced tulips with brilliant marbled colors. Merchants published illustrated catalogs that listed the price of bulbs according to the type of tulip. The growing demand, especially in France, drove up prices, so that a tulip exchange was established in Amsterdam in 1636. The following year, the price of one particularly prized bulb reached the value of a modest house. That's when things started to get strange. In his book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, 7 published in 1841, the Scottish journalist Charles Mackay reports a series of anecdotes from the period. He tells of a sailor who inadvertently ate what he thought was a small onion left on his captain's desk, not realizing it was a Semper Augustus, a rare tulip bulb, the price of which might have been enough to feed the crew for an entire year. The reckless sailor was reportedly sentenced to prison. In 1637, bulb prices began to fall when traders were unable to find new buyers willing to pay stratospheric sums. Speculators who had amassed stocks of bulbs were ruined. The collapse of a previously safe investment vehicle shocked the Dutch public. From railroads to mining companies, to real estate, to beer, to even bicycle manufacturers in the late 19th century, dozens of speculative bubbles have filled the pages of finance books for centuries. The most important of these, which resulted in the collapse of Wall Street in the fall of 1929, after years of speculation on credit, shattered confidence in the American economy, and set off a domino effect that led millions of people to ruin and opened the door to the Great Depression. Companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange lost a staggering 89% of their value in 4 years. Nearly a century later, this collapse is still a source of great fascination for the world's financial community. $5 trillion. One of the most recent speculative bubbles took the world by storm at the end of the 20th century, the dot-com bubble. At that time, investors were scrambling to make investments in technology companies that often had no customers, no products, and whose profit outlook was more than a little cloudy. I know, I was one of them. In my early 20s, I worked as a journalist for an outdoor magazine. It was a dream job. I traveled, tested outdoor equipment, and had the opportunity to interview adventure giants like Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first, along with Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, to conquer Mount Everest, or Reinhold Messner, the first person to climb all 14 peaks over 8,000 meters. At that time, another passion occupied my mind, sometimes with even more insistence than the world of the outdoors, that of the internet companies. My boss, Stefan, the magazine's editor-in-chief, and I had started investing in Netgraphy, a young publicly traded Canadian technology company that promised to use the power of the internet to crush the mainstream media. In a few months, the value of our investments doubled, then tripled. Every morning at 9:30 a.m., when the markets opened,